So we're in part 10, going through Revelation, but of course, as we have gone through this series, we're closing with Revelation, but we had been doing all the writings of John. So we started out and we were looking at the epistles of John first, and then we did his gospel, and now we're doing the revelation of Jesus, which is John's last book that he writes. And we've been kind of looking at those through lines that he's used and included in all of his things. Just a reminder, kind of the way that John sees it, is he sees things, of course, in the big theological truths and everything, spiritual truths, the big stuff, but he sees that not only does he talk about the Antichrist, the big Antichrist, right? He also talks about antichrists, which are essentially anybody that's pointing away from Jesus, because essentially they're cooperating then with the rebellion of Satan. So that's the idea. So it's applicable not only for the very end times when the battle between good and evil, the battle in Armageddon. It's not just that. It's in our day-to-day lives as well. So that's one of the reasons. We've talked about how the book of Revelation is a book that is always a blessing, as it says itself, but of course that means it's applicable every day. It's not a book that is just like, in case of the end times, break glass and read it, right? It's something that we can read all the time because it teaches themes that move across time. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And we've also rolled out that one of the challenges of understanding Revelation is that just like a lot of other places where God has spoken to people through images and dreams, he oftentimes repeats the same message in multiple ways so that people kind of can layer on. I don't know, have you ever watched somebody do a drawing, like a really good artist, and sometimes what they'll do is they'll start putting lines in, start putting things in there, and every time that they pass through, you start trying to guess what they're drawing. Like, I wonder what that is. And every pencil mark that they make, every brush stroke that they make is true, right? Nothing's true. But what happens is every time they write and draw over it, so when it's a pencil sketch of, a dell in a meadow, it's still the same truth, but every time they make passovers and do layers of color and do this, the truth of it is more revealed, if that makes sense. So it's not, at no time was it never, I just double nuggeted myself. It was always a picture of a doe in the meadow, but you understood it more, the more layers, the more times it goes over the top. That's kind of the sense of it. So that's really what we see with Revelation. And we remember with Daniel, the visions of the beast coming out, the visions of the statue, all of these things were telling history, but they were telling it in different ways. All right. And I use Daniel a lot as this analogy because the story that we're going to be seeing is based on Daniel. It's based on Ezekiel. It's based on prophecies of Isaiah. All of these are woven together within the apocalypse of, that's what this is called, the apocalypse of Revelation. Anyway, so that's what we're looking at. So here when we see the story of the woman and the scarlet beast, this one right here, there's another way to describe it. It's not just a woman. Sometimes it's a prostitute. There's a word for you. That we're looking at now. This section is also, like all of our sermons, interactive. So there's probably going to be a lot of questions coming up. If you want to ask them, you can ask them. Hey, I heard this, and we'll see what we're going to do. Now, so that you get an idea of the pacing of this sermon, we're going to go slower through chapter 17. But then when we go to chapter 18, it's going to move fast. I'm going to read big blocks. Because chapter 18 is a bunch of psalms. There are a bunch of larger pronouncements. And then we're going to dip our toe into chapter 19 just to kind of close it out. There's reasons why, and I'll say why we do it there, and we'll get there. So that's our journey. You guys ready? Yeah. All right, so here's some new images for us to do. What's that? Oh, okay. All right, here we go. So this is the first two verses we ended with last week. So when last we left, we started at the very beginning of 17. If you want to open up your Bibles, please do. If you've got a Bible in front of you, you can get that if you don't have it. And let's go ahead and launch. Here we go. One of the seven angels who had poured out the seven bowls, remember that was kind of God's judgment, right? One of the angels that poured out seven bowls came over and spoke to me. Come with me, he said, and I will show you the judgment that is going to happen to the great prostitute, there's a word for you, who rules over many waters. The kings of the world have committed adultery with her, and the people who belong to this world have been made drunk by the wine of her immorality. There you go. Now, is this all about sexual immorality? Or is this about symbolism? Is there some symbolism? Yes, I will say this, sexual immorality is a problem, absolutely is. And part of the reason is because it attacks the initial blessing and purpose of humanity. Remember, he says, God originally, when he creates man, he says, go forth, subdue the earth, right? And be fruitful and multiply. So there's a sense of that. Those are kind of the idea of having families and building families and replicating and doing that. That's not only a blessing, it's part of our purpose, it's part of how we do it. We're designed to. So things that attack the family, things that attack the reproduction, things that do that are inherently problematic. They're rebellious. So that's a sense of it. So in the literal sense, that's why sexual immorality is an issue. But it is also a spiritual picture. God has used the image throughout the Bible of the idea of the bride of God, if you will, is humanity. Humanity is supposed to have this relationship, a faithful relationship with their Creator. But when we, instead of doing that, we go and worship other things other than our Creator, it's also shown as adultery. It's also shown as prostitution. So literally is sexual immorality, yeah. But it's also because that sexual immorality is a picture of worshiping other gods, worshiping other things, seeking a purpose outside that which God has given us. Interesting, right? Now, Babylon. He's already talking about Babylon, right? He's already talked about Babylon. Babylon is not always Babylon. That Babylon is also symbolic. So when we look through this, the first version that we see of Babylon is also the Tower of Babel, right? And what happens at the Tower of Babel? Do you remember? What's that?
God splits humanity up and separates us all.
Yes, you said God splits humanity up as the result of what happens at Babel.
Try to make himself bigger than God.
Kind of, yeah, there's that. So that's another story that has a lot of layers that sometimes we don't get.
Well, and as I say, we thought that through our own strength, intelligence, technology, we could physically reach God through those things.
Yeah, so like Dan said, we thought that through our own strength, our own technology, that we could seize heaven. And there's a lot of that in that story. See, so oftentimes people go, why do we have the story of the Tower of Babel? They're like, oh, easy, that's simple. The Tower of Babel is the story of how we got different languages. And you're like, not quite. I mean, yeah.
Yes, but.
Yeah.
That's the result of it, but that's not the lesson
Part
that's
of
taught.
the story, but it's not
Yeah,
the story.
it's the consequence, not the lesson. Now, one of the issues that we use here, and I've mentioned this several times, hills aren't simply hills in the Bible. In the ancient world, hills were places that you sought power from the heavens. That's how come repeatedly in the Old Testament it says the king did this and the king did this, but he failed to take down the high places. Because that's where ancient people thought that they would meet the heavens. The Tower of Babel, it's not about the building of a skyscraper. It's about the building of a high place. That because they had the brick, they could put a high place and worship other gods. Any place that they could build a high place, they could focus on drawing in spiritual power to do their bidding. The Tower of Babel wasn't simply a rejection, it is a rejection of God's command. So God's command was be fruitful and multiply, right, and spread across the earth, or across the land. That's what he said. But then you look at the very beginning of the story of Tower of Babel, they're like, we don't want to, now that let's build a high place, right? Let's build a place here, let's build a city, and not do what God said, and seize spiritual power for ourselves. Is really what it's a rebellion, which is why God says that, if they're capable of seeking spiritual power to enforce their will on the universe, there's no telling what they can do. That word high place, or the tower that they're building, the ancient word ziggurat is what they start building. What are those? Those were temples. The idea of a temple was a tower that had its head in heaven. So it's that. So what happened is not only disobedience in the Tower of Babel, but it was adultery. That's why we see Babylon. We see that story moving through. It's why we link the rebellion that's happening in Egypt. The plagues of Egypt was judging those spiritual powers, those spiritual gods that they were worshiping or seeking to do. So that's what we see. So, yes?
Is that why they have so many high places throughout the world where we built towers?
Towers, absolutely.
Like the Aztecs?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a common. So, Dorothy, my mom has reminded me because she watches this. She's like, Rick, you gotta
Repeat what I said.
repeat what the people say. So I'm trying to be good. I was like, you're right. I gotta remember. So Dorothy made a great point. She asked, is that why they build? We've got temples and everything on high places. The Aztecs and all these people. Is that why they continue? Yes, it's absolutely. It's a universal thought. Even when I was in Tahiti, when I went to Tahiti, that's what they said. They said their gods lived up in the hills. And people, they wouldn't go up into the hills because they could get judged by the gods in the hills. But they believed that the gods were giants that lived up in the hills. And then some of their descendants came down and they were the nobility, but they weren't quite as tall, they weren't quite as godly, but they were, that's how they did things. So that's, again, it's common within humanity to see things this way. So yes, when we're thinking about this adultery image, it's all of those things. So an angel took me in spirit, so he's going to explain some more, and he gives, now we have another vision. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that had 7 heads and 10 horns, and the blasphemies against God were written all over it. Now, the way that NLT is translating the blasphemies against God, because the sense of that could be a whole lot of blasphemies, or it could be every blasphemy that could be is written on the beast. In other words, the rebellion that happened, we will do this, not your will, my will, not thy will, was kind of that blasphemy, that rebellion, and all of it is over the beast with 7 heads. So we see that picture again. A woman wore purple and scarlet and beautiful jewelry made of gold and precious gems and pearls. In her hand, she held a gold goblet full of obscenities and impurities of her immorality. Wow. Not nice, right? Not a good picture. So, what do we know about this woman? Who is this woman? Who do people think this woman is? We'll read a little bit and we'll come back. A mysterious name was written on her forehead, Babylon the Great, mother of all prostitutes and obscenities in the world. I could see that she was drunk with the blood of God's holy people who were witnesses for Jesus. I stared at her in complete amazement. Okay, so now we get an idea of who this is. So, Babylon. It is at its heart the spirit of rebellion that comes from Babylon. Yes. People have identified with it as many places throughout history. Like I said, Babylon's not always Babylon, right? It's a spirit of rebellion. So remember the picture that, back to Daniel, when Daniel has the picture of the statue with the head with gold and it changes all this, he was talking about empires that had been before and empires that were coming. But it was all one picture. It was all the people that had been promised the power in their world. There's a sense where it continues through. Is it literally 7 or is it figuratively 7? I don't know. Because we've seen in the imagery here, 7 is also symbolic. It's symbolic of the whole body of something. So we saw the letter of the 7 churches. Was that only for the 7 churches? No. It was for all the churches that ever would be and ever were and all over the globe. So there's a sense of it being the completeness. So really this is the complete embodiment of rebellion. That's one of the senses of it. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like sometimes we use, you say I was forever, I was there for, trying to think of it was, the run was like 100 miles long or 1,000,000 miles long. It's not literally 1,000,000 miles, but I'm conveying something with the number. The number's doing that. So we do see that sort of stuff. So it's not important for us to identify and name, the first guy must have been Nimrod because we see him establishing a city in Genesis. And then we're like, it must be this. Or the first guy is because who's the first guy to build a city? What's that? Cain. Cain's the first guy to build a city. So is he the first guy that is in rebellion and doing this? Not going. It's not important for us to geographically identify this. And I just want to say that about this book. God is deliberately obscures who these people are because it's important for us not to know exactly who it is, but it's important for us to ask the question, is it us? Does that make sense? In the Last Supper, Jesus informs his disciples that one of them will betray him. And the response from the disciples is what? Is it me, Lord? If you're asking if you're obeying Christ, you're in the right place. If you're in that spot that you're like, am I being an antichrist? Am I not pointing people toward Jesus? You're asking the right question because your desire is to point toward Jesus. Does that make sense? It's important not for us to be able to identify and say, Rome is the evil city. Because then we as Christians would then say, well, let's gather together and burn down Rome, and then nothing, or Mecca is the rebel. So if we wanted to be Christian, we don't want to be in a state where we identify exactly what the image is and then think that just by destroying that image that we saved humanity, because that's not the reality. The reality is, just like Jerusalem at the time of Jesus, the leaders of Jerusalem at the time of Jesus thought they were claimed to follow Yahweh, right? And they're like, we're the children of Abraham. And Jesus said what? He said, nope, you're the children of the devil. When he calls them a brood of vipers, that means the children of a snake, right? That's what a brood of vipers are. When he's calling them a brood of vipers, or when he's calling them the children of the devil, it's the same thing. You're following in that. So that's kind of the sense here. we're in a good state if we're looking at ourselves. Now I'll start naming some other possibilities. So other images that have been in here have been Babylon, absolutely, because Babylon was a place that... But when Persia was in charge, it was the Persian Empire, right? When the Assyrians were given victory all over time, it might have been Nineveh. And we'll just move forward. When Rome was in charge, absolutely Rome. Did Rome hunt down Christians? Absolutely. And so these places where authority and power seems to go up, then we have to ask whether or not they're following Christ or not following Christ. Could it be America? Absolutely. Why could it be that? Well, because right now we're a voice. When I say America, maybe it would be the city. It could be New York. Why? Because New York is maybe the financial capital of the world that could be in rebellion to Christ. Could it be Washington, D.C.? Oh, sure, that's the political or military capital of the United States. That might be pointing in a way other than Christ. Could it be Los Angeles? Hollywood? Absolutely, because we teach all manner of obscenities sometimes out of that area. So it could be. It's useful for us to think, but it's not just like now we could say that. 100 years ago, we might have said London. You would say, Hail Britannia, right? The sun never sets on the British Empire. And they're out there, right? It could have been London at that time. Did they ever kill Christians in London? Absolutely. They did. During the time of the Catholicism trying to restore. Actually, before that, we learned about people that translated the Bible into English. William Tyndale, he was killed because of that, by those powers. We had people smuggling Bibles in, killed in England. We had early Protestants killed and burned at the stake in England. Then, when Protestantism took over, then Protestants killed Catholics. And then when Catholics took over again, Catholics killed Protestants. And then when Protestants got back, it's like this same, so there's the blood of Christians in London. Paris. There's the blood of Christians all over Paris when Paris was powerful. Right before Napoleon was conquering everything that he wanted to. Previously, the streets were filled with not only the blood of nobles, but the blood of clergy. When they were beheading people, they weren't just beheading nobility, they were beheading priests and nuns. So, all of these countries have at one time had that sort of thing. When they have that power and that will, they tend to murder. I will say one thing that we are, as far as America, one saving grace to think maybe it's not us right now, is that we have yet to have a purge of believers in America. But before we get too cocky, it isn't hard to get there. Germany was, on paper, a democratic Christian nation when Hitler took charge. And within a few short years, they killed 6 million Jews. So the ability to swing that way is dangerous. Our ability, the thing that protects us or doesn't protect us, is not our geography and it's not our biology. It's whether or not we're submitting to God's will. That simply choosing to not submit to God's will puts us on the side of the Antichrist. Does that make sense? Other possibilities that are sometimes spoken of is that Babylon the Great here is, and this has been one that they've often mentioned, the Roman Catholic Church, or Judaism without Christ. Those are other groups that are mentioned. Why the Roman Catholic Church? We'll look for some other hints at that, but a lot of it is because they see it as possibly a church that's not pointing toward Christ. So there's some signs. Now let me tell you this. There may have been times, because have there been times where the Roman Catholic Church has killed Christians?
Yeah.
Yes. So it could be. But before we think that it's because of the denomination, I would say, if you've read news stories, even in the 21st century, are there places where there are churches that say Christ on the outside of the building but are not pointing people toward Jesus? Dude, that's apostate. That's evil. That's very much part of the Antichrist kingdom. So, what we do is we don't want to be the guy, gosh, in the parable where we say, oh, thank God I'm not that guy. Look how holy I am. We don't want to be that person. We want to be like the first person, which says, forgive me, Lord, oh, what a wretched man I am. We want to recognize that our sinful state has gotten in the way of us doing the right thing. And we therefore submit the rulership of our lives to our Creator through Jesus Christ. Does that make sense? All right. So here we go. Why are you so amazed? The angel asked. I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns on which she sits. The beast you saw was once alive, but isn't now. And yet he will come up out of the bottomless pit and go to eternal destruction. And the people who belong to this world, whose names were not written in the book of life before the world was made, will be amazed at the reappearance of the beast who had died. Right. Reestablishment maybe of the Roman Empire, the reestablishment of Babylon. It could be all these. There was a time where people said it was Saddam Hussein was the beast in the Antichrist. Did you guys ever hear that?
Oh, yes.
So here was why. Not just because he was trying to organize the Muslim world underneath the Sunni Muslim banner in which he would be in charge of this great caliphate. It's also because Babylon, physical Babylon, is a set of ruins in Iraq, and one of his passion pet projects was rebuilding Babylon. So people are like, oh, that's the guy, but that's partly because they fixated on that, and because of that, we're at risk. One of the risks that Jews in the first century had was that they said, we're God's people because of our genetics. We're God's people because of our geography. And Jesus is like, no, you are part of the kingdom by your obedience to Yahweh. And which is why it's important so often in the Gospels that he identifies people that have the wrong genetics, the wrong geography, and says, I haven't seen faith like this, right? It's a lesson that in the stories collected in the book of Judges, there are a lot of prominent Gentiles that are shown faithful. And there are also a lot of prominent Jews that are shown not faithful. So the lesson that obedience and connectedness to the kingdom is based on, again, our obedience, our submission. All right, guys, can you admit, just a quiz, a Bible quiz for you. In the genealogy of Christ, does that include non-Jews in the genealogy of Christ?
Yes.
Prominent non-Jews. And they're prominent because not only are they non-Jewish, but they are also people that are noted for their faith. So the breadcrumbs have always been in there. That's always been that idea. So we see that. This calls for a mind of understanding. The 7 heads of the beast were the 7 hills where the woman rules. They also represent 7 kings, 5 kings who already fallen, and the 6th king now reigns, and the 7th will come, but his reign will be brief. All right, so when we look at this, 7 hills. That's where some people say this is how we know it's Rome or the Roman Catholic Church, because Rome was known as the city of 7 hills. It could be, but I'm going to step past that and step into the symbolic realm, the spiritual realm, because we've already established repeatedly 7 means not just physically 7, it's the whole completeness, right? The complete body. So when it says the 7 hills here, I don't think that we're talking specifically about 7 literal hills. I think we're talking about the whole slew of things that we worship other than Yahweh. Which is why, repeatedly, the judgment includes the knocking down of hills, the leveling of hills. It's not because God doesn't like a hill. It's because he's leveling all the places people are seeking power other than Yahweh. So the leveling of the hills is less of a geological event and more of a spiritual-logical event. Does that make sense? It's the destruction of the towers. It's the destruction of the temples. It's the destruction of all things that we lay our heart toward that isn't Yahweh, because it's wrong. And it's not evil for God to do that. Imagine a cupboard, and you have one cupboard in your house, and within it is everything from Drano to baby's milk. Not baby's milk, that sounds weird. Cow's milk that you feed babies. That makes more sense. It's all in the cupboard. The child is just as likely to grab the Drano as to grab the milk. It is not evil for a parent to come in and take all the poison and take it away. You wouldn't say, how evil is that parent for taking away the Drano? The child should have the right to choose the Drano. Right? That God wouldn't, you would like, no, I think he probably should. So that's what we're seeing when he's laying down, because the picture that's going to be given in the Bible is ultimately there's going to be one high hill of Jerusalem. Now it's not good, there's not literally going to be one mountain in the whole world, and every place else is going to be Nebraska. It's going to be one place in which we can worship. And not one geographic place, one spiritual graphic. I'm making all kinds of new words on it. But that's the idea. It could, and it could be in Rome. Could it be in Rome? Sure. Could it be restored European multination thing? Yeah, I mean, that seems very literally what we've got, but whether or not it's the nations we have today or the nations that we'll have 5,000 years from now, don't know. Shoot, it could even be 10 planets. We could have 10 planets of... God can tarry as long as he wants. He can do whatever he wants to before we get all at any moment, like I've said before, do I think we're in the last days that Jesus could come today, this afternoon, before I'm even done with the sermon? Absolutely. But I also think that God would have had no problem coming 33, 34 AD. And we have, what's that?
A problem that we have, I mean, often with all scripture, but I think especially in Revelation, is we try to squeeze God into our own limited understanding.
So
rather than looking at it in light of eternity, like you were just saying, like, we don't know.
Yep. And so
people 2,000 years ago thought it was going to be within their lifetime.
Yes.
People 100 years ago thought it was within their lifetime. We think it's within our lifetime. And we try to squeeze God into our limited understanding
Yes. It's good. Now I got to remember to repeat it so it goes on.
We should
Sorry.
have
I wasn't trying to interrupt in order to cut you off. I was actually trying to, like, I did put in this because it was a good thing. I was like, we need to, like, slower
We
bites.
do it like the annual meeting. Please come up to the microphone.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that people that are live streaming are concerned about it. It felt almost, it was getting to the point where you go, do you take this man to be your husband, the love and cherish, they'll like, repeat after me after you say this whole thing. You're like, I don't know. All right, so what Dan was making a great point is that we often think that the last time are right now. We put everything in our lifetime, so even 2,000 years ago they thought it was all there. Now here is the kernel of truth in that, is that the spiritual war that's happening at the end is happening in our life. The picture of the marking the seal on people is us doing evangelism. And that's been going on since Jesus left. So as we tell people about Jesus and they accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior, they're marked as part of the Lamb's kingdom. And that is going on. Will that be going up on Judgment Day? Yes. And, okay, so there's going to be a Judgment Day for people. Absolutely. And if today you die, guess what? Today's yours. So there's there's a time that it's going to be, individually people go, but there's going to be time we're going to carpool, right? But there's a sense of that. So there's always the immediacy of it. But because of God's grace, like the story Jesus said, he's waiting for the weeds and the wheat to grow so that the wheat isn't accidentally harvested or isn't accidentally consumed by the weed. It's not, they don't take up, and so that's what we have. Is we have the wheat is revealed when you give your life to Christ, and you go, that was wheat, and then when you don't, oh, that was weed. So that has to be, that's going through. Did I cover most of that, Dan? Okay. That was good stuff. I needed like a directional mic, like one of those, that they use in sporting games that has the little the dish. And as soon as somebody starts talking, you just go.
Portable mic.
A portable mic, toss it out there.
Yeah.
All right. So this eighth king, 10 horns of the beast, or 10 kings who have not yet risen up to power. They will be appointed to their kings for one brief moment to reign with the beast. They will all agree to give him their power and authority. Together they will go to war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will defeat them because he is the Lord of all lords and the King of all kings. And his called and chosen and faithful ones will be with him. All right, so that's kind of like a picture of the Battle of Armageddon showing up again here, that we see these repeated images. So we're retelling history from the crucifixion up to Judgment Day. We keep going over that same period of time. Then the angel said to me, the waters where the prostitute is ruling represent masses of people of every nation and language. The scarlet beast and the 10 horns all hate the prostitute. You're like, well, isn't she riding on them? Yes, she is. For those that are wondering, the prostitute, I think there could be a case that the prostitute, and I take this on the lowest authority because it's the lowest position. I want to put it out there. I'm nervous about putting it out on the internet because sometimes without context, people have used this to justify hatred of Jews. But there's a possibility that the first woman and the second woman are the same woman. So the pregnant woman that delivered Christ was a picture of Israel. And then here, what we have is a picture of an Israel that is not being faithful anymore. Does that make sense? In this case, you could look at it as maybe, just take it in low understanding, but just to put it out there. Maybe it left me. The prophet who married,
Hosea.
what's that?
Hosea.
Hosea.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's going through, because the problem, Hezekiah came in my head, and I'm like, Hezekiah's not even a prophet. And my brain's like, no, it's an H. It's the H one. I was like, that's not the H one. Anyway, yeah, Hosea. Hosea, who was told to marry a prostitute to illustrate Israel. Her tendency of sleeping around with other things. Remember, Ezekiel made the point that here in the temple, when Israel was being, or Jerusalem was being judged, in the temple to Yahweh, priests within the temple to Yahweh had shrines to other gods inside the temple of Yahweh. That sounds like spiritual adultery, right? Right there, that's happening in there. Now, every language and nation. Could this be a picture of the church, of an apostate church not pointing toward Christ? Yeah, sure. There's some similar languages to the picture of the church, but in this case, they're going in the wrong direction. Could this be a picture of America as the great melting pot in the world, but maybe not pointing toward Christ? It could be. One concern for us as America is we are a nation formed on creeds, but more than that, on a creed to Jesus Christ, absolutely. But we could also be seen as being a collection of people who claim Christ, but maybe aren't following him, which would make us antichrist, right? So it's concerning. Could this be a picture of the Jewish people collected from all the nations, but thinking they could follow Yahweh, but not follow his Messiah? It could be. The importance isn't, again, for us to find an institution and say, that is the enemy. There are many people who think that is why, that's why we're Protestants, we don't like Catholicism. No, we don't like the idea of not being obedient to Yahweh for one reason or another. So that should be our looking how we can be obedient to Yahweh, how we can follow our Lord Jesus Christ. That's our defining, follow Scripture and doing all that. And resisting the tendency of following the wisdom of man over the wisdom of Yahweh. That's what we're supposed to be doing. It's not important for us to find a denomination to dislike. That's not important. Or a nation or a city to dislike. They will strip her naked. The other reason I would make the case for maybe Jerusalem is that what we've already seen is we know there's a point where all the nations in rebellion attack Jerusalem. We've seen that already in one of the earlier times. One of the times that the painter went across the story, right? We saw the prophets standing outside Jerusalem condemning the rebellion. So we've seen that in one of the swipes of the paintbrush going across. We've seen the armies gathering up outside Jerusalem, outside Armageddon to get. We've seen that in another pass. So all these passes coming across are giving more and more weight. So there's a possibility that that's what we've got. They will strip her naked and eat her flesh and burn her remains with fire. That doesn't sound nice, right? Yes, but that's what we're seeing there. For God has a plan, has put a plan into their minds, a plan that will carry out his purposes. Why would it be, let's say, if it was Jerusalem, why would it be in his purposes for that area to be burned? Because one thing that comes in at the very end is a new heaven and a new earth and a new Jerusalem. So there's a sense that this is the final judgment. There's a sense that we're clearing away the garden, burning away the weeds. They will agree to give their authority to the scarlet beast, and so the words of God will be fulfilled. And the woman you saw in your vision represents the great city that rules over the kings of the world. So we see all those things. The fall of Babylon, right? This right here, chapter 18, and again I'll read large blocks here really quick. After all of this, I saw another angel come down from heaven with great authority, and the earth grew bright with his presence. Who is this angel? What do you think? There's two really good clues there. You guys are making you Bible scholars. Remember, angel means messenger. It's the same sense. It's always the same sense. But you're right. So it's conveying the idea of the Father. Good guess, but here's more. So who has all power and authority? Okay. Whose splendor is he reflecting? He's not reflecting somebody else's splendor. We're seeing the splendor of him that's lighting the world. It's Jesus. Da-da-da. It's yet another picture of Jesus in the story. In a sense, this is a idea of Jesus coming into the clouds.
Could that be translated all authority instead of great authority?
It could be. I don't know, but yeah, it's the same. It's the same. It's that same sense right there. It's another picture of Jesus. So we've seen him, we've heard about him as the lion, we've seen him as the slain lamb, we've seen him as the angel with the where he kind of ends it all, where he does the harvest, and this is what we see here. He gave a mighty shout, so we hear that voice again. It continues in. Babylon is fallen. The great city is fallen. She has become the home of demons. She is a hideout for every foul spirit, a hideout for every foul vulture. Again, that's the same word as the eagle elsewhere. And every foul and dreadful animal. There's a sense that he's judging against it. They're hiding out in amongst the things. That's part of the reason why it's fallen. It's being cleared. For all the nations have fallen because of the wine of her passionate immorality. The kings of the world have committed adultery with her because of her desires for extravagant living. The merchants of the world have grown rich. Then I heard another voice calling from heaven, so this is a different one, and it says, "Come away from her, my people. You do not take part in her sin, or you will be punished with her, for her sins are piled up as high as heaven, and God remembers all her evil deeds. Do to her what she has done to others, double the penalty for all of her evil deeds. She has brewed a cup of terror for others, and so grew twice as much for her." This is a judgment of this idea of the leading people away from Christ is going to be a judgment on her. The glorified, let me just make one more note. Back to the Jewish sense. Judaism apart from Christ would be literally leading people away from Christ, which is not good. But because of that, Christians in history have said, well, when Jesus calls them a brood of the leadership that rejects him as a brood of brood of vipers and all this, and saying they're children of the devil, then when they see synagogues in their town, they would say, oh, those synagogues are places of the devil. So that they would burn and persecute Jews, which is not how we should. We're not supposed to do that, right? It's not our job. Our job is to witness to them, to show them God's love and offer grace so that some among them may come to know Jesus. But that's the sense of it. That's what we're seeing here. But there's a very real way to look at the Bible and see that what is the defining of 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century Judaism was the thing that defined them was their rejection of Christianity. That as the rabbis then reestablished Judaism or built up Judaism post the destruction of the temple, was with a profession, and one of the key professions was the rejection of Christ. So there is a sense that that kind of has echoed through there. But, gosh, before we go, oh, it's the Jews, I have heard people claim to be Christians but reject the power and authority of the Bible, or the power and authority of the teachings of God, and suggested that maybe something else. That, man, I've heard people talk about the great commandments: love the Lord with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And they start on the backside, and they say, don't you see, it all starts out with self-love. You just got to love yourself. And then when you can love yourself, then you can love others. And then when you can love others, then you can love God. And you're like, that's totally upside down. But they put a cross on their outside of their door, and they say, what we're good. Or we say, you know, God gave you all these desires. Your job is to live your desires. No. Listen to that. That what I desire in this world often can be the God that I serve, but oftentimes it's not the God I should serve. What I want and what I need oftentimes are not the same thing. And that's this idea. So when we see all of these stories, what we see is this final judgment, and the final judgment is the judgment against sometimes the things that we want, against those things, to leave for humanity the things we need. This judgment is clarifying and is pointing people toward Christ. They will stand at a distance. These are merchants. This is this idea that there's the people that are battling against that. And then there's people that profited on those people. The merchants will be terrified by her great torment. They will cry out, how terrible, oh, how terrible for you, O Babylon, you great city. A single moment, God's judgment came on you. The merchants of the world will weep and mourn for her, and there will be no one left to buy their goods. She bought great quantities of gold, silver, jewels, pearl, fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet cloth. They made things made of fragrant, is that pine wood? Fine wood? Vine wood is, yeah, anyway, ivory goods and objects made of expensive wood and bronze and iron and marble. She also bought cinnamon spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, flour, wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, wagons, bodies, that is, human slaves. All right. Wow. Lots of stuff here. But I don't think it's accidental. These pictures are all things that would be true in a church, in a cathedral, or true in a temple. These images are very reminiscent. You have the Lord's Supper pictured within here. You have incense that would be used in an altar, or the incense that would be used in the temple. So there are a lot of clues that this is spiritual also, that's at the heart of this. Cathedrals in Europe, it could be that. It could be something like that. Anything that looks like it. It could be a mega church that isn't pointing to Christ, that would still have all these things that look like, but are still not pointing. Boy, I say mega church. It could be First Baptist Main Street, USA, if they're not pointing to Jesus. It could be us. True North Community Church, if we're not pointing people to Jesus, and we're pointing them away. The fancy things that you've loved so much are gone. They cry, all your luxuries and splendor are gone forever, never to be yours again. The merchants who became very wealthy by selling these things will stand at a great distance, terrified by her great torment. They will weep and cry out, how terrible for the great city. She was clothed in the finest purple and scarlet items, decked out with gold and precious stones and pearls. In a single moment, all the wealth of the world is gone. This is one of those reasons people are like, see, that's how we know end times are here, because it sounds like nuclear destruction of everything going away in a minute. So now got a question for you. Did God need people to know how to split the atom for Sodom and Gomorrah to be destroyed in a moment? Okay, so God's always had the ability to destroy things in a moment. So us being able to have nukes doesn't make it, okay, now the end can come. And all the captains of the merchant ships and all the passengers and sailors and crews will stand at a great distance, and they will cry out as they watch the smoke ascend, and they will say, "Where is another city as great as this?" Oh, these two. And they will weep and throw dust on their heads, and they will show grief, and they will cry out, how terrible for this great city." The ship owners became wealthy by transporting her great wealth on the seas. It is, and in a single moment it's gone. But now there's a second voice that comes in. "Rejoice over her fate, O heaven and people of God and apostles and prophets, for the last judgment, God has judged her for your sake." And then a mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a huge millstone, and he threw it into the ocean. Just like this, the city of Babylon will be thrown down with violence and will never be found again. And the city and the sound of harps and singers and flutes and trumpets will never be heard from her again, and no craftsman or tradesman will be found in her again, and the sound of the mills will never be heard from again. The light of the lamp will never shine in her again, and the happy voices of the bride and grooms will never be heard from again. And the merchant, they were the greatest in the world, and were deceived the nations with your sorceries. There's a kind of a judgment, and your streets flowed with blood of the prophets and God's holy people, and God's people were slaughtered all over the world. After all of this, so this is kind of the sense of this. Now I wanted to do a couple verses in the next, because the end of the world is not the end. Then I heard what sounded like the vast crowd in heaven shouting, "Praise the Lord! Salvation and glory and power belong to the Lord, belong to our God. His judgment are true and just, and He has punished the great prostitute for who corrupted the earth with her immorality, and He has avenged the murdered servants." Closing out right there. I just wanted to dip my toe in chapter 19 and remind you guys that while we see the judgment at the end of the world is not, it has a purpose. It's the idea of ending this suffering, ending all of this, and reestablishing a holy garden, a holy place, a hilltop where we can all meet God together. And that's the picture that we have here. So it's not a book that ends in destruction. It's a book that ends in rebirth. Just like your lives. You too have been